Ashley Feinstein Gerstley. Welcome to Jewish Money Matters. How are you? It's so good to have you here.
It's so great to be here. I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We haven't been in touch since back 2018 when you were last here. I mean, this was way before this show was this show. And I have to tell you a little funny story. This is really the show that I wanted to have back then. I don't think I had the confidence to do it. I'm actually podcasting already for 5 years. It's next week is our anniversary, but yes, but even then, I could see I had people like yourself. I had people like other influential people in the personal finance space, Barry Tesler, Barbara Stanny, and I'm so grateful for that. And here we are today. You're coming back on the show with a new book that I'm so excited about, Ashley, Financial Adulting. I mean, I needed it, right? I needed that right after college. And I can't wait to dive in. Yes, look at that. I can't wait to read the book. But before we get into all the juicy content, all the helpful information that you have in the book, I would love to start with something that you told me prior as we were kind of exchanging, having a prior conversation. And that is that you tackle an interesting topic, and I commend you for that. In fact, I think right in the intro of your book, you tackle it, and that is Jews and money, meaning that stereotype, the economic libel, thing. And that was really bold. Why don't you tell us, what did you say there, and why did you think it was important for you to address this in this particular book?
Yes. So it could be a very long story, but
as the Jewish one is.
Yeah. How many days do you have? But so you know what happened? So this book is the second chapter is called Equity in Money, and talking about privilege and talking about how money isn't the same for you if you are from a different gender, race, ethnicity, sexuality, if you have a disability, if you're a mother, like so many things affect every area of our personal finances. And after the murder of George Floyd, I started my anti-racism journey, unfortunately, late in life. And I worked with the sensitivity editor on this book. And honestly, as a Jewish woman, I've definitely experienced anti-Semitism, but not to the extent of what I experienced in this recent, rising of the conflict in May. Mm-hmm. And I had written this book where I am talking about and, fighting for equity for all these different groups of people. And I'm like, what about my people? And so that's actually I started really learning about anti-Semitism and how it works and how it's been used historically. And there's the economic libel is a huge part of anti-Semitism. And so I thought, I can't, it's the scope of the book isn't tackling anti-Semitism in its entirety. It's a money book, but I can talk about it through that lens in this book and talk about money and these views that are persistent, and in a lot of different circles. So And because the preface of a book is usually about yourself and introducing yourself, and as a proud Jewish woman, I thought it was important to have that in the beginning of the book.
Yes, there actually is. I don't know if you came across this book, but there's a very interesting book called Jews and Money by, do you have that book?
No.
Wait, hold on. I got to tell you this. Hold on. It's by Abraham Foxman when he was the director of the Anti-Defamation League, and it's fabulous. It is fabulous. In fact, one of my guests sent it to me, just because she thought I'd be interested. It's a fabulous book.
That is so cool.
No, you're huh?
I'm writing it down. Must
read.
Yes,
you totally should. It really does explore the libel in depth. It's really very fascinating. And you're right. I think for us, especially in the personal finance space, when we talk about, definitely your race and your gender has an impact on the access you have to resources and also to the information, right? And maybe we feel like we can't relate as much to that story, but there's a deeper financial story of racism that we could totally relate it's important that we communicate that as well and not shy away from that.
Yes. And I think there's there's the very like outward things, and then the more kind of insidious in small, that kind of slip in and people might not notice them. And so I think, I'm still learning and I have a lot to learn about it, but I definitely, and I'm starting the journey now as like a 35-year-old woman really digging in, but it's really important.
Yeah, it is important that we build that consciousness. So the book takes us in, it almost, I feel like I haven't read it yet and I'm dying to read it, but I feel like it probably takes us where your prior book left us in the 30-day money cleanse. Now we're going into a deeper dive right into our money management. I want to ask you, was the impetus the fact that you didn't have such a book? Because I know for myself, I didn't know anything, Ashley. Like, I graduated college. I got my first investment banking job. No one had ever taught me how to deal with my student loans, what was a 401k and what was I supposed to do, or even negotiating. Like, I didn't know to ask for more. And not only did I didn't ask for more in that one job, I didn't do it in my job afterwards either. Like, there was just so many things that I just didn't know. Was that the case for you? And is that related to why you wanted to write this book?
Yes. So I remembered that we have very similar backgrounds. I was an investment banker in my first job, studied finance, knew nothing about money. And you're right. My first book was very much about budgeting and money mindset. But then people would say, well, what about investing? Or what about my loans? Or what about negotiating? And there were so many questions that, even though that was really helpful and a great guide for that specific topic, there was like, what's next? What is like, and so the goal of writing this book, definitely, I wish I had this book when I graduated college, in my first job, even in my first internship when I was earning money. And I think there's this idea that financial adulting is an age. It's like right when you are earning your first paycheck, but a lot of us are starting to financial adult a lot later. And because we don't learn about this, and there's kind of like the level up financial adulting topics in here too, like estate planning and taxes and your credit score. And so there's, my goal was, and it was hard to put it all in one book. It was double the length when I first wrote it and I had to cut it down. But the goal is that you read through it, you learn a ton, but it also can sit on your shelf. And maybe it's not time to buy life insurance now, but you have your first kid and now, I'm going to pull that book off the shelf because I remember Ashley talked about what I need to know. Or my friend just asked me about my 401k. Let me just go to that chapter on work optional so that it can be a resource to come back to. And my goal was to put everything I think a financial adult should know in this book. So it's definitely a how-to, and then also talks about mostly a how-to with guidebook exercises like my first book, but also talks about some of the problems with our systems and how things aren't equal for men and women, or even worse if you're a woman of color or a mother. So I go into some of that too, with the help of 35 experts that I interviewed.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Now that you said that, and I'm processing, the fact that you and I didn't have this information, or and all the financial mistakes we made or whatever, a part of me does think that part of the reason I didn't understand a lot of these things is because I was an immigrant. I mean, granted, I was an American citizen. I grew up in Puerto Rico. I was born in Puerto Rico. So by birth, I was American. But the truth is, Puerto Rico is a very different country, even though people might not realize. And I don't think my parents were really so familiar with all the things that, are kind of standard in America. And, these 401ks and these federal student loans and all the things that we do have access to here. And even I'll say, even the idea of a woman negotiating for salary maybe was culturally foreign to them. So it's definitely not something that a lot of this lingo I totally didn't grow up with, which really brings us to what you just said, that you weave into the book, and it really speaks to what really I was set up to be, kind of like to live this wealth gap narrative. This, let's go there. Why don't we go there? Because really, it really does impact the wealth gap. And I know that it's something that you tackle in the book.
Yes. So it's interesting too, because there's so much nuance to it. Like there's the immigrant experience of being the first in your family to potentially go to college, or be the first or at least one here and go through the student loan process,
right?
Have a company 401k or a W-2 salary. And then even for the people like whose parents may have had that, I find they still don't teach them about money because they make a ton of mistakes, or they feel like, who am I to educate them? And so what I found is it's never malicious, even if the parents have the information.
Right.
Or sometimes it's a place of like, they're so young and innocent, I don't want to burden them with this, because to them it's so burdensome. Right. But to a kid, they don't have that negative connotation of money. And so they wouldn't necessarily experience it that way. But there's a protection or feeling like, who am I to teach it? Or an actual never having experienced it, that ends up having people not. And also I've had, through my interviews for the book, even someone whose parents or grandparents were terrific investors, they only talked to the boys in the family about it and not to the women growing up, even when they were like, I think she said, when I was finally in my MBA program, I'm like, can you talk to me about this? Like, I want to learn. But it was just, so there's like so many instances of this information not being passed down. And talking about the wealth gap. So I break it down in the book, and we talk about some or I catch myself saying we in the book because I interviewed 35 people. There were like editors galore. So it feels like I worked with a team on this
team
book.
Effort. Yes. It takes a village, people, also to give birth to a book.
Yes. So I keep saying we, but I'm like, really? I said it. But the wealth gap has like this historical, like from enslavement, when America had the free labor of Black Americans, and then through like the Native American, like different practices where indigenous people and laws lost their land, and then this keeps getting perpetuated. And then there's like current oppression and discrimination. Like there's a chapter in the book on buying a home, and if you are Black and your home has pictures of your family, or you're there for the appraisal, studies show that your home is appraised for 23% less. And that's like your current asset, not even accounting for the like taken away intergenerational wealth from all those years of enslavement or other types of policies. So it was through my interviews. And I think the good news and bad news of being a financial adult is that you really don't have to know everything to be the financial adult. It's okay to still make mistakes. I learned so much from the people that I interviewed, and I still have so much to learn. So that's the bad news is you're never done. But the good news is you don't have to know everything. There's experts and people to learn from, and you can always be learning, and things are changing. But from my interviews, I saw very clearly that our finances in every single area were impacted by this. And it's all interconnected, because when you're paid less from the wage gap, you have less to invest. You're taking out more debt. If you're a woman or a person of color with the same credentials, you're getting a higher interest rate. That means more of your money is going to interest, so it just like it was just very apparent that it impacted every area.
Yes. You'd be fascinated by this, but I did not know that fact about purchasing a home. And if you're a Black family and there's pictures, I did not know that. And it's quite shocking. I'm not surprised though. And it reminded me of a recent story that I just read in Bal Harbour, Florida, where we had the Surfside tragedy only, what was it, a couple months ago, right? That area used to be a no Jews. Now it's a thriving Jewish community. It used to be a no Jews allowed area. And when the rabbi first came to settle there, he wasn't allowed to purchase a house. So how did they buy their first home? So his wife is a very witty woman and very outgoing. She happens to be a real estate broker too now by career, but she actually finagled her way into the appointment to this property that they wanted to buy, and kept her husband home, because he was visibly Jewish and she wasn't. She was a very elegant, fancy lady. Nobody could, overtly tell that she's Jewish. And she finagled the deal. And then only then after did they realize that they had sold the property to a Jewish family. And that's how that community started. Can you believe this? And this is only 30 years ago.
My dad actually, my dad's in real estate and mortgages. And when I was writing about this, got taken out of the book, but just that deeds said, like, you couldn't be Black, you couldn't be a Jewish person and own this home. And my dad remembers seeing advertisements in that same area that said, always a view, never a Jew, like, for marketing properties there. Like, it was, and in his lifetime,
This is not that far back, people. We've come a long way, but I think we have a long way to go still. So why don't we talk about as we're tackling all the things, right? Like you said, you said it beautifully. Like, don't feel like you have to know it all now. We learn as we in the doing. That's where the learning is happening, and there's resources like people you can ask, and there's wonderful books like yours. But really, there's so many, Ashley, like so many financial balls to juggle as an adult, right? It's student loans, and it's credit card debt, and it's your monthly budget, and your retirement, and then investing out of retirement, and buying or not buying real estate. There's also advancing your career. There's just so much stuff that comes with that big word adulting, and people get overwhelmed. I think a lot of what happened is, for us, is we also got overwhelmed by the list, and so we drop 90% of that, and we hope and pray that somehow it's going to, work itself out. But that's probably not the right approach. So how should we be looking at all these things and, kind of like lessening the overwhelm and setting the priorities, because a lot of times we're going to have to be addressing things in tandem. A lot of these priorities might bump up against each other, which it's only natural. So help us through the process for those of you who are listening to us and are thinking, I just don't even know, how could I do all this?
Yes. And I really empathize with that feeling, just because we work, like, if you're working, if you have a family, if you have this is not what we're spending our days doing, right? We don't have open days to just manage our finances. So I think a lot of it is knowing what we need to know, and also taking it a step at a time. So I think when you think about how we typically make New Year's resolutions, it's like this idea that we're going to be someone else tomorrow. We're transforming, like, tomorrow I'm this whole new person. That's not necessary to be a financial adult. It's also sets us up for failure, because there's no way, like I mentioned, there's very little chance that I'm saying my whole Sunday is putting together a budget, and then the next Sunday, that I'm able to carve out all this time. So, what I'm a big fan of, and it actually is a win because it makes it easier and it makes it more likely that we'll stick with it, is just taking small, consistent actions. And it doesn't, and if anything feels like, for example, if I say an action and someone might say, sure, I'm going to do that. But then in their head, they think, there's no way I'm going to do that. That seems really scary and too much time. We want to break those steps down even further, because our progress in our financial lives is not linear. It's not, I'm saving $5 now, so it's going to take me 1,000 years to buy a house. No, like, when you went from being not a non-saver to a saver. And now, as we take those little steps each and every week, they build, and we have exponential progress. So I think I would recommend never belittling those little steps, and just keep moving. Like, if you have 10 minutes, what is a step you can take, instead of feeling like I'm doing nothing, or I'm spending all week dealing with my finances.
Yes, we definitely have to break it down in small, actionable steps. I think it's key. And listen, reading the book, which walks you through all the important stuff that hints at, oh, you're not maxing out your 401k. So maybe that should go in the priority list. Maybe I should call HR, right? So that's a tiny bite-sized step that can have a huge impact impact. And it's just, a quick phone call or a quick, meeting, or even logging into the account. And, but
Right.
if we don't read about it or become aware of it to even make that decision to take those steps. Now I do want to ask you about, there's people who might be listening to us, and they might be, they might want to live, they might be dreaming big and they want to live their life. And it's something that you alluded at the beginning of your answering my last question. They don't want to be tied down by all this stuff, so how do we reconcile the fact that, yes, we should be living lives with meaning and purpose and dedicating our time and energy to what's really important in life, right? With the fact that these boring type, quote unquote, boring, fundamentals are play also an important role. How do we help people reconcile that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I would say one of the most powerful financial rituals that I recommend is having a money party every month. And that's time. And you can have them more frequently. Some people like to have them every week, but it's just time we carve out of our schedules to deal with our money. And it's a great time to look at your spending, to look at your goals, any things that come up throughout the month that are not urgent can happen in the money party. And what I think is great about that, and reframing, because I love how you're talking about this like push and pull of I want freedom and to live my life, but this other thing is like, I need to do it. Realizing that planning, like having a budget, which we often give connotations of limiting our fun or restricting us,
right,
actually allow us to build in the things, right? If there's room, we could build in things that are fun and meaningful to us, and we can actually see if they work. Like if the income can cover that and we can still save for our goals, then we can do those things without feeling guilty and with peace of mind. And so for me, that like knowing that allows me to enjoy the things that I do choose to indulge in or choose to do that are more frivolous, because I know that they work with the plan. And I found for myself and others in the community that if we don't plan, kind of everything feels guilty. So yeah, we might feel like we're free of all the plans, but it's not really feeling free. It's kind of like this impending doom of, I don't know if I can retire ever. I don't know what's happening. My debt's rising. Like that is not a fun way to be on a vacation, right? Versus I've saved up for this. I'm going to enjoy every second. I know I can get the massage, so being clearer, like that clarity, I think allows us to enjoy the moments a lot more.
Yes. Fully on board. I mean, and there's no better feeling than going on that trip, that vacation, and you can do whatever you want because you've saved up for that, and there's no guilt, and you're not coming back from the trip to think about how in the world am I going to pay for this, right?
Right. And there's studies that show that like we actually don't, if it's on a credit card or we have to pay at the end, we actually aren't enjoying the end of the vacation because we're so stressed about thinking about having to pay for it versus if not even if we've prepaid, but if we've pre-saved or know how it's going to happen, we don't have that same doom coming at the end of the vacation.
Yes. I want to ask about these money parties because when it comes, we call them money dates in our family, and we actually, my husband and I do them weekly. They're pretty short though. They tend to be 30 minutes, sometimes an hour, but for sure not more than that. When we are married, it becomes of the essence. It really does. And a lot of people tell me, well, I can't really get my husband to sit down and talk about money. What have you found in your community? What are some things that people can do to really bridge that and try to get both parties on board to be part of this conversation? Because it's not just you, it's a whole unit who is utilizing the money left and right. So together we have to make sure it goes to the places that we want it to go.
Right. I think a great place to start with money conversations and relationships is what you want. Like, what are we going at? Like, what is the goal of this? What are we going after? Because that can provide a lot of motivation. The other thing I found, especially if someone is saying they're not able to talk about money with a partner, it's probably a stressor. And one of the things I love about the money parties or dates is that it compartmentalizes these conversations. So instead of, what happened with the Amex bill, like these things popping up, it's like, okay, let's talk about it at the money party. So it's
Yes.
1 hour or 2 hours or half hour where you can also very intentionally set the mood of it, instead of it being a, hey, I'm running out the door, what happened with this bill? It's like, okay, this is a no shame zone. This is no judgment. Let's be kind. And you can really set that intention going into having these conversations. And I do think also, like, instead of, I think if it's never been talked about, the goals is a great place to start. And also just how you were raised. What are your first memories? I think a lot of times when we're having a disagreement about money, instead, if someone, I find that there's typically a spender and a saver in a relationship, and we polarize each other, that instead of saying, why did you spend so much? Like, share, like, what is that triggering for you? What are you afraid of? And like, I don't want to do what my parents did, or I don't want to not be able to do XYZ that we've been saving for. So really get to like the underlying fear of what is triggering that anger or that reaction. And I think it creates a lot more empathy and able to get on the same page versus just thinking someone's bickering at you for no reason.
Yes. And I think part of the message that you and I are trying to communicate also is, I think in a marriage, not talking about money is not an option. It's like, you can't just use that as an excuse. My husband won't talk about money. Well, that's not really an option.
Right. There's so many reasons. Yes.
I'm not saying get rid of him, but figure it out. But that's not really a healthy option. Speaking about healthy things, yesterday I was having a money date with my husband, and this really came up, which is very interesting that it did come up. My husband pointed out to the fact that there's still some narrative that we've internalized, where the message that we internalize is almost like it's not as important for us as women to have the skill sets to make and manage money as it is for the male in the relationship, which is a very outdated message and very harmful, both for women and for the couple, for the institution of marriage. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit, because I think as women, we have to know that we have bought into that. And it's almost like we do the thing and we start our career, but we're always kind of like, it's not as important, and I will take a pause anyway at some point. And it doesn't seem like it's a dangerous thing, but it is a dangerous thing.
Yes. Yeah. There was a statistic, something of like, even women now having this idea that the white knight is coming, or like,
Prince Charming is coming. And when Barbara Stanley wrote that book already, what was it? I don't know. It was a while ago. I feel like we still have this in us. Yeah. It's crazy. But even myself, like my husband was pointing at it, where we're having this whole conversation, and he's like, I want you to notice this, that, yes, number one, obviously we have to know that God is responsible for the results, but we're really both responsible for the effort in achieving our financial goals. It's not that we have a goal and, hey, you husband, it's your job to deliver on the results. Like that old collective Prince Charming story that we're carrying around.
Yeah. And I think, I'm definitely not an expert on everything, like on this at all, but what I see is that it's in the stories, like even if you just like watch movies.
Yeah.
And like some of them looking back, I'm like, I can't believe I watched this as a kid. And, the last generation, just how we were raised, how we see our families operate. And also that pressure. So first of all, if the woman in a relationship is not knowing where the money is or understanding of the money, and it can feel kind of like a burden being lifted to not have to deal with that or understand it, but it's a powerlessness. It's like a giving up of power. In also, if something were to happen,
God forbid, right?
Problem. And I think that on the other side of it, it also is a tremendous pressure to the men in the relationship that, and in society, right? It's part of toxic masculinity that they have to be providing, they have to do more, like it's all up to them. So I think 100% that it's something that is socialized and reinforced, and something to not give up on and continue to work towards having that equity in the money conversation. And you know what, I think another thing I see a lot that came up when you were talking about it is working with couples. I noticed that a lot of times the woman, if it's a heterosexual couple, the woman knows just as much, maybe not more than the man about it, but it sounds a lot more confident.
Yes.
And
What's
he probably,
up with that?
yeah. And I'm like, well, and so like, there is this feeling of responsibility to know and understand, and maybe there's a faking there about it. But I think there's this feeling that, oh, he's already so far ahead and knows so much more, when really not. And that if she was part of those decisions, they would be made a lot more soundly. So
yes.
Just an observation I've had in my couples.
Yes. And two heads think better than one.
Yes.
in most cases.
Like in most cases, the partnership has each person has different strengths, and helps mitigate some of our weaknesses. And so I agree that having two people making decisions is more powerful.
Yes. Yes. As you were writing this book on financial adulting, were there any things that kind of surprised you that you were like, ooh, I didn't approach this way. I didn't know, as you're conducting these interviews, or that you were like, maybe I should change my approach on this. Were there any surprises?
So definitely a lot of learning, but one thing that I realized I did wrong was estate planning. Yeah.
Tell me.
I interviewed a trust and estates attorney, and we, through my husband's last job, we had, it was like a legal service, and they set up the wills for our children and all of that. And anyway, when I was interviewing this attorney, and really that was a place where the nuance and the details are so important, and it really depends on your state and so many things. But I realized that the way we did it really was not optimized at all, and would create a headache for the children if something would have happened to us. And so when I actually made a note, I'm like, we need to really level up in financial adult with this estate plan after I interviewed her.
That's great. And I think that speaks to one of your initial points, which is, you can keep the book, and you'll see yourself in those steps, right? Wherever you are. And okay, I need to focus now on this, but I'm going to get to a later stage in my life where I'm glad I'm reading this, and I'll come back to it, right? I might not have kids right now, so life insurance might not be a thing. A will might not be a thing, but it'll need to be a thing in the future. And if you're not aware of it, it could cause a lot of financial problems.
Yes. And what I found from interviewing the trust and estates attorney, her name is Lorianne Douglas, was that a lot of times people don't make these plans unless they've seen a family member or a friend go through a really bad situation from it, or they've had a close call with their own health or something. So it's hopefully more and more, as it's talked about and people are reading the book, it's something they'll do more proactively, and not have to have like a horrible situation to have them prepare for that.
Speaking of talking, because a part of this is really becoming more open and speaking with more people about it. Because how can we learn if we don't ask the questions, right? And we're so terrified to ask. I wonder how, as you became, a coach, and you started, becoming a financial expert, did your circle of friends actually start coming to you and asking? Because I'm finding that even as a podcast host in this, and even though I teach a program, it is not that many people that are still from my close, intimate relationships that come to me for advice. It's very interesting. There's still a little bit of that resistance, and that's okay. But
right.
I don't know it all that, but I think there needs to be a more open conversation.
Yes, I think that makes sense, that it would be not from your close circle, because I think it's harder to talk about with people you're close with and admit that you don't, the vulnerability of it, or if it's a specific question, like details about your financial situation. I think people do like the anonymousness of it. So I would say definitely like have noticed people are very open when they don't know me and they have questions.
Right. I have the same.
Yes. And more definitely like depends on the person if they're very open about it, or some people love talking about money even if they're in a close relationship with me. So I think that's interesting. I think there's a lot of shame in not knowing, and that's something that I wish I knew, is that really nobody knows about this. And
Yes.
we think that everybody else knows and we're the only ones, but it's really the opposite. And when I started doing this, like when I started the blog, The Fiscal Femme, was 2011. And I thought, okay, I don't know about this, so other people must not, because I studied finance, I worked in finance. And then I started giving talks, and it really didn't matter if I was speaking at a bank, if I was speaking at an MBA program. One time I was speaking with a mentor, we were having coffee and he was helping me with my business. And then at the end, he's like, can we talk about finances? And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's everyone. Like nobody knows about this.
Right.
So I think that can really help make it less scary to talk about, because, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of pretending and a lot of, by keeping us not knowing, then people can take advantage of us. They can sell us things. We have less power. But I think that even though it's depressing that nobody knows, I think that is kind of has helped me and a lot of people be more open about it.
Yes. And this is why we need books like yours. We have to normalize the conversation, and we have to make the information available. The more we're learning about it and normalizing learning about it and exploring it, the better we're all going to be.
Yes.
And if we go back to the idea of, solving systemic issues and issues of inequality, right? That's also a great motivator, because money is this tool for change.
Yes.
So if we want to have change, and I wonder if you could address that a little bit, because that has to do with a mindset, right? Sometimes saving and investing and all that stuff honestly can be really boring, right? But if we can get behind a really clear why, then that will change. So help us through that, because I think there's a little bit of a struggle there for people.
Yes, I love that, connecting it to the why. So one of the things that really motivated me when I started doing this is that I saw how money gave me freedom in my choices and power over how I want to spend my time. And that is very important, especially for women who might have less of that, right? Given the inequalities that are definitely financial, which I talk about, but in a lot of other ways too. And also I think, so if we look at how important it is for women to be wealthy, it is like in everything. It is, the world will be so much better if women have more money. They're giving back to their community, they're investing in their family, companies, like even just like the economy. There's statistics that if we had equal labor, GDP would go up by a great percentage, that companies do better when they have diverse leadership. Like it's everything. And so it's a win-win-win. And I find that, just like you mentioned, like negotiating for myself is great. Like I want to have more, that's great. But when I view it as I am paving the way for other women to negotiate, or I can do this and now I can teach people what I learned, like I am making it possible I'm doing it for women everywhere. And having that feels that's different feeling going into a meeting. And the other thing I found in talking to people is there's usually like a person in your life who kind of nudged you. And it might be the coworker who said, you should really look into that 401k thing, or here's what I earn, let's compare so we can see if it's fair, or like whatever, here's how I budget, and the more of us, the more we learn and the more we know, we can be that for other people. So on our own, we're helping close these gaps by getting more wealthy, but then we're lifting up the other people in our lives. So that's, I get chills just thinking about how important that is.
Yes, and it speaks to the power of a woman, right? A woman is really influential. We are the epicenter of our homes, right? We really have the most influence, and in our communities, we're so influential. I love that visual of, I'm doing this not just for myself, but really it's for the women that come behind me, my daughters and my nieces and my sisters and my friends, right? It really is a collective effort.
Yeah.
and an
Every
important
effort.
and an important one, that maybe our grandmothers didn't have the opportunity, even our mothers. Seriously. So yes. So before we wrap it up, Ashley, I'd love to ask you if there's one piece of advice that, as you're coming out of this financial adulting book, that you want to leave. Obviously we're going to read the book, but you want to leave listeners with, that you feel it's like, oh my gosh, like this is a nugget that I need everybody to know.
Mm. So not to go backwards, but just to the point on the mothers, there's, in the book, I talk about the racial wealth gap and also the gender wealth gap, and a statistic in there, I think it was 1977, that women could get a credit card on their own
That's
without
right.
having a man in their life
A
co-sign.
man co-signer.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
this is like recent history, and makes sense again, like,
It's so recent that I was a baby. I was born in 76.
right. And so I think too, I think in personal finance, there's a lot of blaming of women. Like, why aren't you doing this? You should be knowing, like, we couldn't even have a credit card. Like, we are doing a great job. So I think, and even like with the negotiating, women are negotiating as much as men now, but there are real repercussions when we do that can be negative. So really
Oh,
acknowledge,
yes.
like, that it's not our fault. Like, yes, we can be proactive and take action, but there are reasons why women are more hesitant to negotiate, real implications. So that just got me on a tangent, but I'd say that a nugget takeaway, because so for me, it's all about action. It's like, what is the step? And if I could leave people with something, it's like, what step were you inspired to take by this conversation? Take it within 48 hours, have someone hold you accountable. So for me, it's that. And I think making the steps small, making this as fun as it can be. Like at my money parties, I get cozy, I'll have tea or wine, I'll put on a money party playlist. Like, I can reward myself after, the language we use is important. So just how do we have a little more grace and compassion, make this a little more pleasurable to deal with our money so that we actually do it and take the steps.
Yes, absolutely. You just reminded me, very recently I had a situation, and I was so proud of my husband and of my mother-in-law, who raised such a nice guy. My mother-in-law was very much ahead of her time. She's a big feminist. But my husband was in a situation where he had two people deliver on a project, happened to be a male and a female. And she had not quoted him on a price, and the male had. And he asked her, how much you want to, this was great, it was fabulous, how much you want to get paid, you haven't told me. And she was like kind of fumbling, and she didn't know what to, she's like, well, I don't really know, da, da, da. And he immediately said, well, I'm going to pay her exactly what I'm paying this other guy, because why wouldn't I, right? and then I said, well, you should have paid him more, but but at least his default mode was like, no, there is a price already in the market, and I know what it is, and I'm not going to underpay you. So it's a consciousness.
And now she has that data point of what it's worth,
Yes.
which is huge for her to know going forward.
Yes, yes. So I think part of that message is we all have a piece in this, both male and women. We have to know as women what to ask for and all that, but also the men out of the world also have to know, and we can get into the whole tangent of negotiating against women. There's a whole thing. Maybe you have to bring you back. Maybe that'll be in the next book, right? What we face when we negotiate, because there certainly is there's a lot to dig there. But let's do some of what I call Jewish Money Matters fill in the blanks. And this is a part of the show. It's a little similar to what we did a couple of years back, where I'm going to give you an open-ended sentence and you'll finish it with the first thing that comes to mind. Okay?
Okay.
All right. when I give charity or tzedakah, I like to give to
cleft organizations.
Yes. And I do remember that you told me that
Yes.
last time. Yes. And
Yeah.
we didn't talk about this, but now you're a mother of two.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's two babies and there's 2 books. Congratulations. And by the way, didn't the book come out yesterday?
It did. Yes.
So this is like literally hot off the press, people.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm in birth recovery.
Yes. That's so exciting. So super exciting. Okay. I'd love to make more money because
there's so many reasons. What's the first reason? I guess paving the way for other women to do the same.
Yes. Something I wish I'd learned about money growing up is
nobody feels like an adult. Nobody knows what they're doing. I used to think there was like this moment where you felt like an adult, you know? And there's not. You never really feel like one.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I like that. Okay. Ashley, money, spiritual or physical? What do you think?
Oh, very much both.
Yeah.
But I feel like people definitely err on the physical and not the spiritual. And it's a really important part.
Yes, absolutely. Something I splurge on unapologetically is
what do I splurge on? Babysitting.
Oh, good for you. I mean, how else can you write? I mean, 2 books in what is it? 4 years? Right.
Well, also this is we were traveling with my parents and our littlest one was just learning to crawl and we were with them and it was like, no, they were doing fun things on our trip and we weren't because we had all the naps and my mom challenged me to get a weekly babysitter. And she's like, I know it's expensive, but it's really so worth it. You need to have date nights and start going out. And so it's been life-changing. I took on that challenge. And so I definitely splurge on our weekly going out.
It is life-changing. And for those people who might hear this, I might struggle with, how could I like indulge in that? Think about how you're helping that other person with your money. Like, right? That might be putting her through college. That's helping her feed her family. I mean, again, it all flows, right? And it's there for us to create an impact. And if it's something that is aligned with our values and it's helping us advance our goals, which in this case, it's a family goal, it's a spiritual goal, it's your marriage, it's whatever, right? Then please put it out there because it's helping somebody else as well.
Yes. And I do feel like I'm a better everything when I have fun and I'm, not burnt out but it definitely takes financial privilege. It's expensive. So
it does. So all the, going back to, we got to make more money and we got to manage it smartly so that we can do that.
Right.
Okay. Ashley, spender or saver?
It's fun. So I definitely have been way more of a saver.
Yeah.
Probably it's like been a journey. So spender until I started the Fiscal Femme, probably overly a saver. And then recently I've been like really, I was talking with someone about like lifestyle creep versus an intentional upgrade and just intentionally choosing to spend more because honestly was when that conversation with my mom that really flipped it for me. It's like, what is the point of all of this if I'm not enjoying life? And so very much trying to balance, but because I was so far in the saver direction, I am now moving up to more of a, and a lot of the things I'm considering them investing in my well-being and my happiness. And so I'm kind of moving to the other side a little bit more.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. And how does your husband feel about, how is he on the journey?
So it's funny because we value spending money on different things. And so I very much do not value buying things. And he really feels like the gratification of purchasing something if he can hold it. That's when he feels like it was worth it. Whereas I'm like, we live in an apartment. I don't want more things like that. And also things have to be organized and put away and fixed, and it just feels like less things is less work. But I love experiences like going to shows and going on trips and investing in educational things. And so it is interesting balance and having, so we have, our children are away all day or with other people all day. Like, we have the au pair now, and my son's in school. And so I want the time at night to be more quality. So I would prefer to have like help cleaning and help with meals. And that to him feels very intangible. So it is always again, I feel like a reframe of me recently was thinking like, we both have our strengths and the compromise is probably where we should be.
Which speaks to the importance of those money parties, right?
Exactly.
Yes, we were having a similar conversation last night. Today I'm most grateful for.
Honestly, I'm so great. The book just came out, and I'm just grateful for these types of conversations where just rich pun intended, conversations about changing how we talk about and interact with money. So thank you.
So important. Finally, I'm Ashley Feinstein Gerstley, and I believe Jewish money matters because
Jewish money matters. Really matters. I guess to me, it's like goes back to the equity thing, and and our values, and because Jewish values matter.
Yes, exactly. And if we lead with, I was having this conversation with Joe Saul-Sehy was here on the show this week, and he was saying, and if you lead with values, you solve the money problem for everybody. So true. So true. Ashley, congratulations on the new book. Keep us posted. We can find it anywhere, right? It's on Amazon. It's on your website. Tell us where we can find more. I think you have some goodies also that come with the book. If we go on your website to give us more info.
Yes. So you can find the book it should be sold everywhere books are sold. It's sold out everywhere right now except Amazon.
Wow, that's great.
Yes, but hopefully it'll be restocked soon. And it's financialadultingbook.com. So you can always find it through there. And what's really fun about the book, because I had a hard time sticking with what I was able to say in the book, is there's a toolkit. So I allude all throughout the book to a toolkit that has templates and calculators and lists of my favorite things and the people I interviewed. And so there's a lot of goodies attached to that toolkit that you get when you order the book.
I love that because it goes back to something you said before, that you're all about the action. So am I, right? It's like, okay, so it's very practical. It's just, I'm not giving you a theoretical book. I'm giving you the tools so that you can start getting in the action mode right away and making this happen. Congratulations, Ashley. Beautifully done. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me and for the kind words.